First of all, welcome. And Melissa and Charles will be joining us as soon as they can. This was an inconvenient time for them because they have a toddler. Melissa wasn't sure that Charles would be home from work in time, but they'll join us as soon as they can. I remember from our consultation, Fred, that you have 3 children. The youngest is 17. Will any of your children be living with the 2 of you when you marry?
No.
Okay. And do you have very much contact with your children?
No, I don't. I would say my son is fairly, I can contact him because he's on his own and I can talk to him anytime I want, but my girls they both live with mom, and it's, I think they're still a little upset. How about that?
Okay. So the relationship is not very good with the girls in particular?
No, not so much. I have an older daughter, and she doesn't like the idea.
She doesn't like the idea of you remarrying or mom and dad's divorce?
Mom and dad's divorce.
Okay. And then I see your younger daughter, Grace, is 17?
Yes.
All right. So Landon and Logan will be living with, or maybe they are living with you, Karen?
Yes. With both of us.
Yeah, we live together.
With both of you. Great. Okay. And do they have very much contact with their birth father?
Logan, the younger one, on a regular basis, he spends every weekend with him.
Okay.
And his father and his stepmom, who's been around since he was 1. So he has an entirely another family.
Okay.
With them, because she has 2 kids.
Okay.
Landon, my older one's dad, disappeared when he was about 5. And hasn't, oh no, what did I hit? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Do I hit here? Somehow we lost your picture.
Okay.
Do I hit here?
I'm checking my video and it's on.
No, yeah, she hit a button.
Okay.
Here?
Yeah.
Okay, here.
Open, yeah.
Okay, here. Let's see if there you are, you're back. Okay, I won't touch anything.
Okay.
So his dad, when he was about 5, decided that he wasn't going to have anything to do with him anymore. And, but unfortunately he has a half sister who the dad still sees a lot. So in the last recent couple of years, he has periodically seen his dad, like at his sister's wedding.
Okay.
And a couple other things, and he really does not like to be around him or want to be around him because he's basically never been there.
So he's still pretty hurt.
He's very hurt. Yeah.
Okay. So let me dive in here. Let's go to screen share. And So are you able to see the PowerPoint now on your screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, good. Something's working. Okay. So the first module that we're going to cover tonight is building a caring relationship with your stepchild. That will be particularly important to you, Fred. And in a different way, different degree, will also be important to you, Karen, as somewhere down the road, I hope you get to meet Fred's children and build some kind of relationship with them. So when we remarry after either the loss of a spouse or a divorce, the goal that we want for ourselves and for our children is a healthy step family. We want to provide the best environment we can, not only for ourselves in this new marriage, but also for our children. So we're going to look at what is the goal. This is a description of a healthy step family. The husband and wife are committed to learning and using respectful communication skills with each other, their children, and stepchildren. Their expectations are realistic, and we'll cover a lot more of that in a few minutes. The marriage is strong and loving. Honor is given to the other living or deceased biological parents and extended family. And the children feel safe, cared for, and respected by the adults and the step siblings in their lives. Now, none of that was true for Jim and I when we married, and for the first several years after we married, very few of those statements were true for us. Eventually, they were all true as we learned better communication skills, we learned anger management, problem solving, as we discussed in your consultation, and we also kind of stumbled into some of the strategies that are recommended to help step families succeed. At the time, those strategies were not well known, they weren't published, so we kind of stumbled into them by accident, just looking for solutions to the problems we were experiencing. Do you have any comments about the goal? Or can you agree with the goal? Anything there you question?
No, looks good.
Yeah.
Okay. So it seems to be kind of in vogue these days to call a step family a blended family. It may have a nicer ring to it, but I have an objection to the term blended. It sounds like we're all thrown into a mixer and stirred up and homogenized, and we all come out smooth and tasty. And I haven't met any step families where that's true. The truth is that step families are kind of messy. There's broken relationships, it takes time to heal. And the origin of the term step family came from a century or two back. I don't know exactly how far back it was originated, but it came from the fact that in the last century, in the 1800s, the average marriage only lasted 7 years due to the death of a spouse, either by childbirth or by farming accident or war or illness. And when the living spouse remarried, the person they married stepped into the role of the spouse that had died. That's where the term originated. It isn't an ideal term. I wish there was something better, but up until right now, I don't know of any better term. And as I said, I kind of don't like the term blended family. There is no perfect name for this model of a family. And there are now more step families than nuclear or first families in the US. Does that surprise you?
Nope.
Nope.
No, because divorce is very common, and in my case, as you know, my first husband died. We're going to look at some step family stressors. First we'll look at a first family or a nuclear family. In order to create a loving and lasting marriage, a first family needs to have realistic expectations about marriage. The honeymoon doesn't last forever. They need good communication skills based on honesty and empathy. What happens when you have honesty but no empathy? Communication tends to be kind of brutal. If you're committed to being honest, but you don't deliver the message with some empathy, some skill. And then the other wall is successful problem solving. How do you resolve problems in a way that meets both persons' needs? And the chimney fireplace is representing respectful conflict management. How do you treat each other when you're angry or frustrated? Can you stay respectful? And if you're not able to stay respectful, do you know what to do to kind of discharge the energy of your anger? Uh-oh. Hold on a minute.
Nancy, we can't hear you.
Thank you. I put it on pause so you wouldn't have to listen to my dogs barking.
We've already had to mute a couple times because ours are, so.
I heard it once. I was taking a chance by letting them lay up here on my desk so peacefully asleep. They never stay asleep. Okay, so you may be able to look at that diagram and identify some pieces that weren't present in your first marriage that contributed to the failure of your first marriage. Would you say that poor communication skills were part of the problem, or unrealistic expectations, or you didn't know how to solve problems in a way that satisfied you both, or perhaps you became, or your partner became, very disrespectful when there was anger? So you, in your first marriage, were not able to create a loving and lasting marriage. But those are the stressors. Those 4 items are the main stressors on a first marriage. So let's look at the stressors on a step family. All of the 4 that we began with are true for a step family, in addition to all of these other things. Unrealistic expectations are even more devastating in a step family. I don't remember if I covered this when we met together, but the expectation that you can create a step family and make it look, act, and feel like a nuclear family is so unrealistic. A step family will never look, act, or feel like a first family. They're very different dynamics. The age of the children at the time you marry, the younger the children are, the easier it is for the step family to gradually move into a more nuclear family model. But since your children are teenagers, Karen, it would be unrealistic to expect them to look at Fred as a father figure and, accept co-parenting with Fred. The complexity of the relationships is a huge factor in step families. You've already mentioned Karen's kids, Fred's kids, some half siblings for Fred's children. And then there's sometimes grandparents in the picture that want to maintain relationship with their biological grandchildren, but they're not particularly interested in building a relationship with a stepchild. The relationships are very complex, and they create dynamics that require some real finesse to work with. Financial pressures, often in a step family, the financial pressure is greater because they have more financial demands. In some cases, there's legal bills or alimony or other bills that need to be paid that wouldn't be present in a first family. Lack of empathy is a big problem for first marriages, but it is really a big issue for step families. The biggest problem or place where lack of empathy shows up is when a step parent has a hard time putting themselves in the shoes of a biological parent and understanding the depth of connection, or maybe some of the parenting decisions that are being made. And frankly, stepchildren are far more annoying to a step parent than they are to a biological parent. It's hard to have empathy for a stepchild when they're bugging you. The length of time since divorce and death, it takes, sociologists tell us that it takes roughly 4 to 7 years after the loss of a spouse or the loss of a marriage to regain your emotional balance. And often people remarry within 2 years of the divorce or death, so they tend to bring unresolved issues with them into the new relationship. And then there's the good one, the negative stereotypes of step-parents. I worked so hard to build relationship with my stepchildren because I didn't want to be known as the wicked stepmother. And yet, because of things that Jim and I didn't know and some choices we made and the fights we were having, I eventually did earn the title of the wicked stepmother. Took a while to get that label off of my back. And then lack of cultural support. I don't know if you two have run into this with your children, but I think the school systems, most of them are just eons behind the times, because at least half of the children in the school have parents who live at different addresses. And yet any notifications are sent home with the child. The child goes to whatever house that child is living at on that day. And it's up to either the child or the other birth parent to forward any communication from the school to the other bio parent. It complicates the process of communication between exes. In addition to those, let's see, that's 12 sources of stress. We also have the job we'll be talking about tonight is securing, well, next week, we'll be talking about building a security into your biological child through the transition into a step family, and building a caring relationship with your stepchildren. How do you create a workable relationship with an ex? And ideally, can you help develop a supportive extended family? So it's no wonder, it's no surprise that step families have a higher divorce rate than first families, considerably higher, because the sources of stress on a step couple are multiple times more than on a first family. So the most damaging expectation, as I mentioned a moment ago, is that your step family will look, act, and feel like a first family. And the second most damaging expectation is that your partner will love your children the same way you do. We're going to talk a little bit more about why that's an unrealistic expectation right now. This diagram was developed by Elizabeth Einstein. She's very involved in step family education. Let's look at the lines between the parent and the child. There are 3 lines or 3 bonds, strong bonds between a parent and a biological child. One is, of course, biology. This is a child of your blood, of your genetics, unless you adopted this child. And I'm going to put the adopted child in the same box with the biological child because the commitment to connection is there at the same level. But biology is important. I was watching a TV program just a day or two ago, and this person referred to their commitment to caring for someone because they're my blood. It just creates a very strong bond. And then there's the emotional bond. That's the second bond between a parent and child. You conceived this child, you gave birth to it. You saw every little nuance of growth and change as that child developed. Literally, by the time that child was only 5 years old, you'd already had millions of emotional connections with that child, enjoying their first smile, watching their first steps, laughing at their antics, all of those things create a very, very strong emotional bond. The third bond is legal. Our government says that if you do not provide food, shelter, education, and some kind of caring relationship with this child, the government will step in and take that child away from you. So it's a legal contract that is binding between a parent and a biological or adopted child. So let's look at the parent to step-parent bonds. First of all, as soon as you're married, the bond between you will be legal. It's a legal contract to marry someone. And it requires legalities, a legal process to get out of that contract, as you both know. The second bond is emotional. I'm assuming that you've fallen in love with each other, that you care for each other, that you're connected emotionally. That's a very strong bond. And then look at the bond between the step-parent and the child, the stepchild. It's represented by a broken line because it's new and fragile. It requires attention. It requires time to build up any kind of caring bond. And there is no legal responsibility between a step-parent and a stepchild. In fact, if a step-parent is the only parent there when a child is injured and you need to take that child to the hospital, you are not legally able to sign a release for medical care unless the biological parent has given you a document, which I forget the name of right now, but it will be in your handouts that I'll send to you via email after this class. Do you guys have any comments or questions about this diagram?
No.
No, I think we're good.
Okay, going ahead. So we're going to do a brief exercise in empathy. So Fred, I'm going to suggest you go first. You're the step parent. You sit facing your partner and assume the role of one of your stepchildren. Describe what you think it might be like to be this child, speaking as though you are him or her. So I'm going to demonstrate this. I'll use Jimmy, my stepson, as an example. As Jimmy, when my parents' marriage ended by the death of my mom, I felt devastated. It's like the world came to an end. And my dependency on my father grew so much stronger because he was the only parent I had left. I was only 7 years old when this happened. And there was some fear of, if I lost one parent, what if I lost the other one? What would happen to me? So as Jimmy, when my father decided to marry Nancy, first of all, I felt excited, like I was going to have a mom again. And not only that, I got 2 brothers. I had 2 older sisters, but now I was going to have brothers. I was excited to move into a new house. And I wondered if, I would be welcome. I wondered if it would be okay. I assumed or expected that they would all love me because everyone in my family loved me. Everyone in my family thought I was cute. And almost I could do no wrong. It was like everything I did was cute. But what actually happened was my mama Nancy had different ideas about what I needed, about my behavior. She wanted me to brush my teeth twice a day and take me to the dentist and make me pick up my toys and things that, kind of discipline things that my first mom had not expected of me. Now I wish that I'd had the understanding to know that Mama Nancy, was really trying hard to fill in some gaps in my education. And when Mama Nancy and my dad fight, I am so afraid of the anger. I'm afraid of the conflict between them. And yet I know that I take advantage of it to get my own way. So I was speaking there, imagining what Jimmy's thought processes were the first year or so that we were married. Now, you can mute yourself if you don't want me to hear you, Fred. I'll give you about a minute to speak as one of your stepchildren, and I recommend you pick the stepchild that maybe you have the most difficult relationship with or most uncomfortable relationship. And then after a minute, I will ask you to trade places, and Karen, you assume the role of one of your stepchildren and follow these, fill out these sentence stems. Is there any question about this exercise?
No, we're gonna give it a shot.
Give it a shot. Good attitude. Go right ahead.
Wow. So, through the eyes of Landon, I would describe this as another boyfriend of Mom's. Jeez. Okay, so guess this guy's gonna hang out. Seems like okay. I don't like certain things about him, but he leaves me alone pretty much. So I've felt so alone since my dad hasn't been involved. And I hope this guy's trying to step in and trying to do stuff, and I don't dig that. So next one is when my parents. So when you guys decide to get married, it's okay. Wondering how much it's going to change. Probably not much since he already lives here. But what do you expect? Oh, I would hope that he would want me to take care of you. Hope she takes care of Mom, or I hope he takes care of Mom. What would he wish for? I don't know if I did have a wish. I don't know what it would be. It's a tough one. That was funny.
They think your dogs are in my backyard.
Yeah, well, they may have
to go get those dogs.
They may have heard Toby too. So why don't you trade places at this point, and Karen, you do the exercise with one of your stepchildren.
It's tough, huh?
Well, the tougher part is that I don't know either one of your children the way that you know mine.
It's true.
But I'm going to say as Robin. So I'm going to say that I've but maybe once met his children.
Uh-huh.
So Robin, who seems to be having the most difficult time, who's come back from college recently.
Okay.
When my parents' marriage ended, I was shocked and devastated and hurt. I am very mad that my dad is going to marry this other person. I assume he'll continue to be involved with her and her kids more than he was with us in the last few years before the divorce. I wish it could just go back to the way it was. But I'm afraid I'm so hurt and mad that I may not have a relationship with my dad like I used to.
Good job. When you said that Robin assumed that his dad would spend more time with this new person and her family, if he believes that, or if he sees that happening, what are one or two other emotions he might experience?
Rejection, anger.
Yes. My son Peter was only 8 months old when his father died. Stephen, the older child, had a few key memories that he could hang on to about his dad, but Peter had none. And when Jim and I married, he saw up close and personal, under his own roof, the kind of relationship a dad could have with a son. I mean, Jim and Jimmy played games together almost every evening. They would go play tennis together. It was like a living demonstration of what he'd been missing. It was very painful. He and Peter eventually developed a very mutually respectful and loving relationship, but that didn't happen in the beginning. So, did either of you have any insight as you were doing this exercise that is new to you?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on. The parenting and step parenting guideline is that the biological parent remains the primary parent, hopefully in cooperation with the ex, with the other bio parent, if that's possible. That means that the bio parent makes any major decisions about that child. The bio parent does all of the disciplining of the bio child, or children in this case. The step parent's role is to support the parent's choices. And I'll give you some ways to do that, to make that more clear as we go on through this program. The step parent's only real job is to build a caring relationship with the stepchild. And the way you do that is by sharing activities or interests, to show up at ball games or school events, just in a quiet, kind of unassuming way. It's a difficult role But the more you, as a step parent, support the role of that child with both biological parents, the faster that child will trust you and accept your caring, maybe even reciprocate your caring. The key for a step parent is to never, some considerations are the age of the child at the time of the marriage. The younger, the easier generally this would be. The relationship of the child with the other bio parent. So in this case, Fred, it would be their birth father. How strong is that relationship? Even if that relationship with their birth father is not very strong, the child will still resent it if you speak badly about their dad. And neither one of you, ideally, will criticize or speak badly about the other bio parent within hearing of that child, because the child will be defensive and reactive if either parent is criticized, even if the relationship isn't that great. The temperament of the child has something to do with this, because some children are just more easygoing and accepting. Other children tend to fight the flow and dislike change. This is important. The child determines the rate at which a caring relationship develops with the step parent. And you look for clues. You can't just ask them, are you ready for a more caring relationship? But you look for clues about how comfortable they are with you. Whether you be careful not to offer more affection or even say, I love you too soon, because it will sound false to the stepchild. The rule of thumb that is sometimes true and can be shortened by observing some of these guidelines, that the rule of thumb is it takes roughly double the age of the child at the time of the marriage for the child to be totally comfortable with the step parent and the step family dynamics. Stephen was 15 when we married. He was almost 30 when he told Jim, "You're the best stepfather anyone could ever want. Thank you for loving my mom. And I just really admire how carefully, how considerately you have been a stepfather to me." The relationship with Peter took a few years, several years, but it happened more quickly than the relationship with Stephen. Does any of that pose a problem, or do you have, either of you have questions about those guidelines?
We'll be dead before my kids like you.
Well, that's a possibility.
We have both agreed that as old as our children are, we might just be on this on our own.
That's a possibility. Although if you observe these guidelines, and next week when we talk about building a relationship with your bio child, I'll have some suggestions for how to possibly repair the damage in the relationship. But the more you support, it's like you, for instance, Fred, since you're living with your two stepchildren, you very deliberately say to them at some time or another, and maybe more than once, I'm not trying to be your dad. You already have a father, and I want you to have a good relationship with your dad, assuming that's possible. So what I would like to be is just a caring adult in your life, like a kindly uncle. I'm interested in you. I hope that I'll be welcome to attend your school functions, or if that, one of those, are they both boys, Landon and Logan?
Yeah.
If they are involved in sports, go to their games, but do it quietly. tell them you're proud of them, or notice when they do a good play, or if they get a good grade. It's just like a thread being wound around a ball. You just layer by layer by layer express caring in a very non-demanding way. And you back up whatever decisions their mother or dad, bio dad, make in regard to these two boys. So they can't pit you against each other. If they come to you and they say, Mom is making me do this, I don't think it's fair, what do you think? Then the way you answer is, your mom is in charge of you. I support whatever decision she makes. And that nips the playing each other against each other in the bud. It just stops the ability of that child to manipulate a fight between the two of you. Unfortunately, Jim and I didn't know how to do that, and Jimmy became masterful at manipulating fights between us. It wasn't Jimmy's fault. I mean, he was just a kid doing what any intelligent kid would do to get his own way. It was the fault of Jim and I because we didn't back up each other's parenting decisions, and I was trying to be a parent when we didn't understand how to make that work very well. No disciplinary role is attempted with a stepchild without a caring, trusting relationship with the child and the support of the bio parent. The reason parents are, generally speaking, more forgiving of a child's behavior is because they have all these years of emotional connection with this child. The step parent doesn't have that. So as a step parents notoriously see stepchildren in a harsher light than the biological parent does. They kind of see them without any blinders on. And often a step parent's assessment of a stepchild may be accurate, but we don't have the emotional connection with that child to temper our behavior or attitude toward the child. I'm going to show you this video of Sherman and Alexa. Sherman did a magnificent job of building a caring connection with his two stepchildren and supporting Alexa in her parenting of them.
In the beginning of our relationship, her children were very standoffish to me. And one day I did a magic trick. And that was it. We were friends. And so I kind of did stuff with them that they had never done before. I found out things that, and even Chelsea, who was a scaredy cat of everything, is now the most bravest girl you've ever met, who's rock climbing and just does all kinds of exciting things. But I found the things that she had never done and kind of did those with her and with Zach, and it brought us close together. Chelsea more than Zach, but we still have a good relationship, I think.
But I think that's something too that comes from being able to inherit stepchildren is when they're younger. Chelsea was 12, I think Zach was 15, where Sherman's daughters were already 19, 20, 21 out of the house. I think he had a better chance of bonding with them, although we did try to do activities with his older children by going to school and doing things with them. Not that I regret that you were in a better position, but I kind of envy that in a way that he got a chance to bond with them at a younger age than I did.
The more the step-parent supports the child's relationship with both bio parents, the safer it will be for that child to care for and trust the step-parent. In Sherman and Alexa's case, the biological father was involved to some degree, but was relatively distant and not interested enough in his children to plan activities with them. So Sherman had an excellent opportunity there to step in as just a male figure, caring male figure to both Chelsea and Zach. And as I mentioned before, neither adult ever under any circumstances speak badly of the other parent to the child. We're going to talk about house rules in a minute, but I want to stop and come here and see, did you get some ideas, Fred, about how to make connections with your stepdaughters? You may have muted yourself.
Okay, we just unmuted.
Okay.
My stepdaughter?
Sons.
Sons. Okay. I'm like, did I hear that right? Yeah, the things that they have done, that was kind of interesting. I'm sure there's lots of things that I could do that they haven't done. No, I just don't know how to introduce them to those kind of things.
You introduce by just asking. You know, I was thinking that you might enjoy, I don't know, going to a car race sometime. Is that an activity that you think you might like? And if they say yes or maybe, then you go look up the schedule and find out when the next NASCAR race is out in Riverside, and come back and say, I can get tickets to go to the NASCAR race on such and such a date. If you're interested in going, I'll get you a ticket. And you just ask. That's how you bring it up. And you don't get your feelings hurt if they say no. It's like, this opportunity is on the table. You can take it or not. And I'll still care for you.
Okay.
Then whatever school activities they have, make sure that you go with Karen. You do not take a dominant role in the school activities. If there's sports activities, you're careful not to make a fool of yourself in the grandstands or embarrass them, but you just show interest in them. It's relatively simple. I think you missed some of those things when, as you shared with me in our consultation, you tended to just stay away from home because you didn't know how to handle the conflict with your wife. So you've lost some opportunities there with your children that have left a gap in the relationship between you and them.
Okay, yeah.
And next week we'll be talking about how to carefully, gently close the gap with your biological children. So just brainstorm with me for a minute. What are some activities that you think Karen's boys might enjoy, or that you might enjoy together as a family, that they'd be open to?
I think the go-karts.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. We just have to put them all together for that. I mean, Logan's been on a birthday party, and I went and picked him up. So that might be something. I don't know.
There is a go-kart racing place in Marriott, or maybe it's Temecula. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I've been there.
Uh-huh.
So that might be something.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Landon, his dad gave him that drone and he didn't really care for it.
I'm having trouble hearing you, Fred.
I said, I was asking Karen, I go, his biological dad gave him a drone and he didn't really respond to it. One of the small drone.
Uh-huh.
What do they call those little drone things?
Yeah.
Well, there's two things. One is he gave it to him like he does. He's given him a few things and he hasn't felt like he deserved them because he doesn't know his dad. But then he had it and he didn't really have anything to do with it after it got here.
Yeah.
Because I didn't do anything with him and you weren't really involved in that. So it might be a question of something similar, because I told you we used to go get those big airplanes and go fly those, and he loved that. It matter of what type of that type of thing he would be interested more so than what we've seen. We don't have a lot to go off of.
Yeah, that's
Learning to fly a drone is kind of a specialized technique, and you might offer to say, you've got this drone that is just sitting there being unused. I'm wondering if you'd like to just go out in a field somewhere and see if we can figure out what to do with it. And if he says no, he really isn't interested, then just drop it. But it might be the fact that he was given a gift, but he wasn't given the time and attention with the gift that would have made it more meaningful.
yeah.
That's what I think has happened. I don't think it's the gift itself.
Uh-huh. What he really wants is his dad's attention, and he's not getting that. He's getting a gift instead. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. So you may be able to fill in the gap a little bit there, Fred, if you kind of occasionally throw out an idea or make an offer or, an invitation and just see what he says yes to. One of the articles you'll be getting tomorrow is an article called Our Book Bond, and it's about how a stepdad over a period of years developed a common interest with his stepdaughter in books. And because his stepdaughter was quite a reader. So you have to pay attention to what is meaningful to that child.
I have a question. And
Yes.
it's kind of weird, but I do tend to throw things out.
Mm-hmm.
I get the no, nah, whatever, a lot.
Yeah.
So on some things, I maybe I know it's the way I go about asking, and maybe that has to be changed. But I don't know. I guess I get discouraged because I try.
Developing a caring relationship with a stepchild, especially a teenage stepchild, is a long-range plan. It requires a lot of patience and a lot of tolerance for rejection. So your discouragement, of course, is very natural. None of us like to be turned down repeatedly. But if you watch the interests of each of your two stepchildren, and when you make an invitation or an offer, you do it very casually, like it's no big deal. They're free to say yes or no. Then over time, they'll get the message that you care about having a relationship with them. Now, they may respond eventually, they may not. You don't have control over that. But just the fact that you're issuing the invitations has to leave some kind of impression on them. I think it's very important as a foundation that you tell them at some point in time or any time that you're not trying to be their dad. They already have a father who loves them, and you want them to have a great relationship with their dad. You're not trying to step into their father's place. That's very important for them to hear those words from your mouth. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Because they might in part be turning you down because they'd feel disloyal to their birth father if they did something with you that they enjoyed. you know, they're trying to juggle the feeling of, yes, I want to do this, but does that mean that I'm rejecting my dad or I'm being disloyal? Is it okay to love both of these men in my life? Or should I only love my dad and reject all of Fred's efforts to make a connection with me? It's a juggling act for the children as well.
Yes, and it's very dynamically different with her two children because of the two differences in the fathers.
Yes. Yeah, it's complicated. So be patient. And when you get your feelings hurt, go to Karen and ask for some sympathy till you can regain your balance again and try again. But I think you're, you know, my impression of you is that you're a deeply caring man. It's just in some ways you haven't known how to express that caring. Didn't know how to deal with the conflict with your wife, so it kind of locked you out of those caring relationships with your children. They can be repaired.
Well, that's good.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. Resume slideshow. House rules. When step parents find out that don't have equal power to discipline a child that they're living with, you share a house with them, it's often a feeling of frustration that you don't have the same rights and privileges as the birth parent. But house rules is one of the ways you can express your preferences and have some degree of control over over what happens in the house that you're all living in. So the exercise you'll be getting by email tomorrow is called the Step Family 5 House Rules. You each will go over a list of possible rules, and each of you separately pick out the rules that are most essential for your well-being. Like one lady last Sunday said, I'd go crazy if the kids didn't bust their own dishes after a meal. You know, I just hate clutter being left on the table after a meal. So that's one of her number one house rules that she has to have in order to feel like she has some control over the condition of her home. Another couple that I know, she wanted her kid, when they married, they had 7 teenagers between them, if you can imagine. And they had certain house rules that everyone, including the parents, obeyed. But then there were other things that she wanted for her children that weren't important to him for his children. So she wanted her girls and her son to make the bed every morning when they got up. That wasn't important to her new husband. So when her kids, you'll get this interview. I won't tell you the whole story because you'll get the interview in the email tomorrow, and I think you'll find it pretty interesting. But here's the video of how Sherman and Alexa set up house rules very shortly after they were married and how well it worked for them.
One of the things we learned from the class was that I wasn't to punish Alexa's kids and she wasn't to punish my kids. We learned to set up rules. And the rules, we sat down with the kids to help make up this list of rules and then to determine a punishment if each of the rules were broke. And we found that the kids were more severe with the punishment than we were. So we had to lessen those back because the crime, or the punishment and the crime had to go together, and they weren't with the way the kids established it, so we had to lessen some of them. But it was a very effective tool because now this list was on the refrigerator, and if Zachary broke a rule, all I had to do to punish him was point at the refrigerator. It wasn't like the punishment was coming from me since he wasn't my biological son. And Alexa the same, she could point to the refrigerator if one of my kids was to violate a rule.
But to give more information to that, Sherman's girls were out of the house in college, living on their own, basically. We had my daughter, who was finishing her last year of high school, and then my son, close enough to college where he would come home for the weekends. So I didn't have much contact with his girls, but the other thing the door that opened up for us is that my job then was just to love. If I didn't have to discipline or bring up conflict, the door was wide open for me to just love his girls, and that I really found that to be really helpful.
It was helpful. My oldest daughter, when she came back from college, she was too old for rules. She didn't think the rules applied to her. And the rules applied to everybody. And if she was going to live there, she had to go by the rules. So she chose to move out, which was very beneficial to her, because she wasn't out too long when she called me and says, "Dad, I now know why you used to get upset at me when I would leave the lights on. I got my first electric bill." So it's a good learning lesson for her.
Of course, being a blended family is a work in progress. And one of the things that we found out is that we had, I think, maybe, 10 or 12 rules on the refrigerator. We wanted to make the rules attainable and not too stringent. And so sometimes something would come up that we hadn't thought about. So we both agreed that if the rule wasn't on the refrigerator with the consequence, then there was no punishment or discipline to be enforced, but then
we'd add the rule.
We'd add the rule. And then we also found it important with the consequences to find out what our kids' currency was. So for my daughter being 17 and being in college, it was her cell phone. So, she was very attached to. But when it came time and when we need to enforce things, she would reluctantly hand it over. But since it was already pre-discussed and on the refrigerator, I imagine that there was probably less drama than there could have been.
Because you could see as the cell phone was coming out to hand over, it wasn't coming very fast. It was a slow, oh, here it is. But they followed the rules. And it wasn't because of their age. The rules didn't apply for a very long period of time, but for that first portion of our marriage, it helped make things easier.
And then probably another thing that I want to say is that through all of this, I called my daughter, who's now 30, and I said, "How was that for you? How was that back then in the day when you had those rules, when everything was transitioning?" And she said that she really appreciated it, because one of the things that she wanted to do was really please her stepfather. She and Sherman were close. He had come in as kind of a father figure for her, and that made it so much easier for her just to be able to step in as a daughter, to understand what he wanted and what was expected of her.
In the beginning of our relationship, her children were very standoffish to me. And one day I did a magic trick.
I didn't know that was tacked on at the end. So how do the house rules sound to you?
We actually have a chalkboard.
All right, all right.
We started it and it never really matured. So yeah, that's something that we need to accomplish.
It is so important. Karen, you are the key here for making house rules work, because you are the one that enforces the house rules. And excuse me, I'm going to go put Toby away. Maybe he'll be quiet. If, for instance, when Sherman would point a finger to the refrigerator with Zach, if Alexa had stepped in and interrupted that, it would have undermined the authority of the house rules. They stop working when they're not enforced. So house rules work when they're enforced, when they're clear, when the consequences are clear, and when they're enforced. So you back each other up with the house rules. My therapist friend of mine told me when we were setting up this exercise 10 years ago. She said that she was coaching or counseling with a step couple, and the stepmother had 95 different rules that she expected her stepchildren to obey.
Oh, no.
And every night she would go over the rules they had broken, at bedtime. I think, what a way to put them to bed. Oh, gee, such a nightmare. And of course, the dad was very uninvolved and had basically turned over the care of his children to this stepmom that was just excessively harsh. So when you do this exercise this week, the goal is to come out with a minimum, or maximum, I should say, a maximum of 10 rules. They have to be the most essential ones, the ones you care about the most, that you believe as a parent that are the most important for your kids. Other things can be dealt with in different ways, but the house rules are things that everyone who lives under that roof obeys. Any other questions or comments about the house rules?
No. Wow, I'm scared.
What? What did you say, Fred?
I said I was scared.
You're scared to do the exercise?
No. I'm scared for them.
Gee. What are you afraid of?
I'm afraid that we can't come up with 10 that we can all obey.
Well, that's a challenge. You may only come up with 5. That's fine. But those 5 need to be consistently enforced. And here's an unrealistic expectation. It's unrealistic to expect kids to like the rules or to like it when they get caught and have to suffer the consequences. It's unrealistic. At some point in time, they'll be unhappy with one of the rules they broke, and as you, Karen, are following through and enforcing the consequences, don't expect them to like it. But as you heard from Sherman and Alexa, they had a family meeting, over the house rules, where the kids got to give their input into how reasonable the rule is, what's the consequence going to be. They had some input in choosing the consequences. Now, Sherman and Alexa said they chose more harsh consequences than they thought the offenses warranted. So they kind of backed up some of the consequence and made them less harsh. But the very fact that the kids were drawn into the process and were part of the team that created the rules for the house made it much easier to enforce.
I think that's reasonable.
I'm very eager to hear how this goes when I see you next week. Okay, back to sharing the screen. I don't know why it's going. What are you seeing on your screen?
The first page.
Yeah, and that's not from the current slide. Okay, so now we go back to just reviewing the long-term goal of a healthy step family, that the husband and wife are committed to learning and using respectful communication skills with everyone. Your expectations are realistic. You build a strong and loving marriage, because without a strong and loving marriage, the whole business falls apart, which gives the children another experience of a failed marriage. Children that have, whose parents have divorced, have a much harder time believing in their own ability to create a lasting and loving marriage. So it's even more important for the step family that is formed to do everything you can to create and sustain a loving, lasting marriage. Some of the couples that I've worked with have told me that their children for the very first time are seeing a loving marriage that's going to go the distance. And one couple I'm thinking of in particular, this was a third marriage for each of them. They had, between them, they had 4 different exes. It was crazy. It was just crazy. But they recently celebrated their 10th or 11th anniversary, and there's no danger of that marriage breaking up. So their kids are living with and seeing an example of a marriage that's last. Honor is given to the other living or deceased biological parents and extended family. You speak about the ex, any ex, with respect, at least whenever the children are in hearing distance. Any other attitude or opinion about the ex is only discussed in private. So here's your assignments this week. We're going to end much more quickly than I expected because you guys had the experience of being the only couple, so there wasn't as much question and answer time as I was expecting. The download of the assignments will be emailed to you as an attachment. Please do not wait to begin this part of the learning because some time and effort is going to need to go in to these assignments. This is where the information that you've heard tonight is translated into transformation in your step family. You decide on your own house rules, read Kip and Wendy's story, and glean whatever you can from their examples. And the step parent in particular reads our book bond and fills out the assessment that comes with it. So next week, we'll be talking about how to give your child the security and stability throughout the transition into a step family. This is particularly pertinent for you, Karen, as your 2 boys are experiencing the transition into a step family when perhaps in the past they've had you all to themselves after the divorce. It's a pretty powerful change of life for children that at least I, didn't pay enough attention to when my kids were going through it. And Fred, I know that we'll have some time to talk about ways that you can begin to reach out to your children and start to heal the rift between you and your kids. Okay, any other comments or questions?
I think we got some stuff out of it.
Great. Great.
Yeah, I look forward to battling the first homework assignment and see how we do with it.
Okay.
Battling.
Well,
because honey, that's just what step parenting is all about. Remember?
A battle? Has
So
to be
far,
about-
that's why we're doing this. We get through the first battle and then it gets easier and then Nancy helps us get through it all.
well, let's not set it up to be a battle. Let's set it up to be an exploration,
Oh, very good. There we
an
go.
experiment, doing these exercises that I'll be sending you in the morning. It's like an experiment. Let's just try this and see what happens and see how well we do. So it doesn't need to be a battle. And if you have any questions or any trouble, if you run into any trouble with the exercises, please email me. I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. And we'll get through this together.